Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Before I dive on into today's review, do want to remind you if you enjoy the Gaming Gang and would like to support the outlet, you can do so in a couple of ways. First, by making a one-time donation through PayPal or by becoming a monthly member of our Patreon. And you'll find links to that down in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you're going to find an invite link to our Discord server. So be sure to hang with the gang over on Discord. So today I am going to be sharing my review of the Starfinder 2nd Edition Player Core from Paizo Inc. This 464-page hardcover is a Gen Con 2025 release, which also means it's going to arrive in stores on July 31st. Carries an MSRP of $69.99. Also on July 31st, you'll be able to pick up the PDF for $19.99. Speaking of the PDF, I am giving away a couple of copies of the Player Core in PDF. If you'd like to find out how you can get into the running, and it is actually pretty easy, all you need to do is watch my first look video for the Starfinder 2nd Edition Player Core. Having said all that, let's swing on over to the other camera because here's the Player Core for Starfinder 2nd Edition. A couple of things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Paizo Inc. were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. It's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside the Player Core. And of course, by way of the title, we know this is a player-facing book, but of course, all this information is equally viable for the game masters out there too. All right, first thing we're going to do, take a peek at the credits page. A lot of folks work very hard to bring this to life. Let's give credit where credit is due. Gotta say, this book is absolutely packed with content. And I know there are some folks out there who were hoping that the Player Core and the GM Core would be combined into one book, like we saw with the first print run of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. But the thing is, that huge Pathfinder 2nd Edition core book had so much in it, books were falling apart. So as far as production quality, speaking of that, I gotta say, I wish Paizo Inc. would use a little bit thicker paper stock. It's not bad. It's not like some of those 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons books we saw from Wizards of the Coast where the pages were super thin. But I wish a little bit thicker paper stock. As far as the artwork, love the artwork throughout. Starfinder always has a little bit of a unique vibe to its artwork. We've got plenty of action images as well as some static images here too. We will see our cast of characters that we've come to love in Starfinder, such as Chick Chick. I like how Paizo Inc. does that we have these various different ancestries and classes and these characters over the years that will appear in the vast majority of the books that come out. So I like that. I like that through line with the Paizo Inc. releases. The book also has a stitched binding, so this should hold up relatively well to repeated use. As far as the contents, we're going to start off with an introduction. It's going to tell us a little bit about the setting of the Pact Worlds, which is where the majority of action takes place in Starfinder 2nd Edition. This is 300 years after the Gap, and the planet of Golarion disappeared. No one knows why. It is a gap in memory. That's why it's called the Gap. So Golarion is gone, and it has been replaced by this giant space station known as Absalom Station. So that is our setting. This is a science fantasy role-playing game. This is not hard science fiction by any stretch of the imagination. Could you use Starfinder 2nd Edition as a hard SF role-playing game? I mean, you could drop the magic and some of the more fantastical sort of technology. But I got to be honest, if you do that, then you're really stripping Starfinder of what makes it unique, what makes it special. So if you were looking for a hard science fiction role playing game, I would point you in another direction. I would not necessarily tell you, oh, check out Starfinder second edition. So we are going to have 10 different ancestries. So we've got a nice variety of ancestries. Each of the entries for the ancestries are going to give us a physical description. It's going to tell us about the society of that ancestry, as well as their belief system. We will have heritages, which gives you an opportunity to customize the ancestries a little bit, kind of make them a little more unique. So one Skittermander character isn't like the next Skittermander character as far as their ancestry goes. For the most part, we will get 4 heritages. Some of these only have 3, but for the most part, you will see 4. And then, of course, we're going to get into our ancestry feats, where you get to choose an ancestry feat at 1st, 5th, 9th, 13th, and 17th level. So, like I said, nice variety of different ancestries here. And for each of the ancestries, you'll see a little bit of information about the sort of character that they're going to make. So if you're looking to have a player character of a certain type, well, then you might want to pick this ancestry. Now, we will move on into our backgrounds. So not only do we have our ancestries, then we also have a lot of different backgrounds, which most of the time they're going to give you some skills. They might even also give you an attribute boost. We'll get into the core mechanics of the game in just a few moments. Then we're going to get into our classes. And like many folks out there, I'm a little bit disappointed. We don't have 8 classes like we saw with the Pathfinder second edition player core. Here we've got 6. We do have a nice variety here, though. So most of your bases will be covered. I know we've got 2 classes that are on the very near horizon, and I think there are a couple more classes that are currently being play tested by Paizo Inc. Something that I have heard through the grapevine, which might mean I'm absolutely wrong, is that with the upcoming Starfinder second edition releases, we are going to see more ancestries, more backgrounds, more heritages, more feats, skills, and so forth than what we would see in the past from Pathfinder second edition releases. So we are going to see more of a sprinkling of those throughout. So, as an example, in the first deluxe adventure, which is arriving on July 31st, also, it is Murder in Metal City. We have a new ancestry that's included with that. So, we are going to get into the various different classes. Just as we saw with the heritages, we will get some information about this is the sort of character that this class will provide. So if you're looking to have a character that does these things, this is going to be the class that you want to select. So as an example, we've got the soldier, and it's going to tell us a little bit about, well, what does the soldier do during combat encounters, social encounters, exploration, downtime, and so forth. Once again, we will have additional feats. So these feats are our class feats. And for the class feats, we actually get class feats more often than we do ancestry feats. So every few levels, you will have brand new feats to choose from. Once again, this makes the player characters extremely customizable and unique. And that is something that I've talked about for years that I think really makes Starfinder stand out, because out of the role playing games that I'm relatively well versed in, I've always felt that Starfinder provided the most options for you to choose from for your player characters. And I absolutely love that. And I think that is also going to be the case eventually with Starfinder Second Edition. We also have skills. So we will have various different skills that the player characters will have. You will have different proficiencies in those skills. More about that when we get into those core mechanics. So we get a breakdown of different feats. We have general feats, as well as our ancestry feats and our class feats. We have spells. We've got a huge number of spells in the player core also, because we've got a couple of classes which are going to be spellcasters. We've got the mystic and we have the witch warper. We've got a lot of equipment here also. I got to say, I was very pleasantly surprised by how much equipment is included in this player core, far more than you'll see with most player facing role playing games. So I thought that was fantastic. Spells, tons of spells. So let's talk about the core mechanics. And one of the biggest aspects about this new edition is it is now 100% compatible with Pathfinder. And I know lots of people out there are very, very excited. I have to say, though, there is a misconception somehow floating around out there that if you pick up the player core for Starfinder Second Edition, that means you'll also be able to run Pathfinder Second Edition adventures. That is not the case, because with Pathfinder Second Edition and Starfinder Second Edition, all the ancestries are different, all the classes are different. Vast majority of the skills are going to be different, the feats are different. So, picking up the player core for Starfinder Second Edition is not going to allow you to run Pathfinder Second Edition adventures. Now, of course, if you have the Pathfinder core books and you also have Starfinder core books for these second editions, you'll be able to combine them, because Starfinder Second Edition and Pathfinder Second Edition are now 100% compatible. Very, very cool. As far as our mechanics, Starfinder Second Edition is a D20 based game. So you're going to be rolling a 20-sided die. You're going to add modifiers or possibly subtract modifiers from that die roll. And you are looking to meet or exceed a target number in order to be successful in what you're attempting to achieve. Now, as far as critical failure, critical success, we do have a critical success if your roll with your modifiers beats that target number by 10 or more. Then it's a critical success. Critical failure is the exact opposite. If you roll 10 or more under your target number, well, then that's a critical failure. And for many of the feats, skills, and so forth, we will get a breakdown of what happens with a regular success, what happens with a critical success, what happens with a critical failure, and what happens with just a failure. There's a lot going on with both Pathfinder Second Edition and Starfinder Second Edition. I know some folks out there refer to Pathfinder as Math Finder. Yes, there is more math involved if you're playing Starfinder Second Edition or Pathfinder Second Edition than with Dungeons and Dragons 5e or new Dungeons and Dragons, D&D 2024. But I'll tell you what, in my opinion, I think the various different options available to you for your player characters, as well as all of the really cool things that your characters can do, far outweighs just the little bit of additional math that you have to deal with Pathfinder and Starfinder. So keep that in mind. Now, as far as those modifiers I was talking about, so we've got our attributes. They are our traditional 6: strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, constitution, and charisma. But we are not rolling 3d6 or 4d6 and dropping the lowest die to get our range of 3 to 18. No, what we're looking at here is just simply the modifiers. So when you choose an ancestry, it's going to give you boosts to your attributes. When you choose your class, that's going to give you boosts to your attributes. Now, there might be flaws too. So, as a starting character, the worst modifier you can have is -1, and the highest positive modifier you can have is +4. Now, that doesn't mean every character is going to have a -1 somewhere and a +4 somewhere else. Now, that's going to be determined by your choices. Backgrounds can give you boosts. So you're going to just worry about those modifiers. We also have skills and proficiency with skills. So those will give you modifiers. So the more trained you are in a skill, the bigger modifier you're going to get. You're also going to add a modifier for your level. Sitting here thinking, well, geez, if it's a difficulty level 15 and I'm just rolling a 20-sided die, that's going to be pretty hard to get a critical success. Well, no, not really. Not when you start adding in all the various modifiers that can come into play. So I like the mechanics of Pathfinder Second Edition and now Starfinder Second Edition. I will tell you, if you are someone using a virtual tabletop, the implementation of Pathfinder Second Edition for Foundry is fantastic. It is numero uno out there as far as ports over to a virtual tabletop. I'm hoping we're going to see the same thing with Starfinder Second Edition as well. If I were running a role playing game utilizing Foundry, I would certainly gravitate both towards Pathfinder Second Edition and Starfinder Second Edition. But as we're flipping on through, we're finishing up. You can see this is just absolutely jam packed with useful information, useful content. This isn't a ton of fluff. We had the Starfinder Galaxy Guide, which came out, which gave us a lot of information about the setting. There was a good amount of fluff there, which is what I would expect. Here in this player core for Starfinder Second Edition, this is almost all useful content you're going to be utilizing at the game table. All right, so that's a quick peek inside Starfinder Second Edition's player core from Paizo Inc. Let's swing on over to the other camera. I'm going to share some final thoughts as well as my review score. So, as you can see, I am really digging the Starfinder Second Edition player core, but that doesn't mean I don't have some critiques and some quibbles. First of all, I, like many other people out there, really do wish that there were 8 classes in this player core as opposed to 6. We got 8 classes in the Pathfinder Second Edition player core. Should have gotten 8 here. And I do understand the 2 that are missing were classes from original Starfinder that a lot of people are very fond of. But we do also know that those are on the very near horizon. I also think there's a couple of more player classes which are currently being play tested. For some reason, that's stuck in my mind that there is a play test for a couple of new classes too. Also want to mention Starship Combat, not a ton of information in this player core about that. I will say Starfinder First Edition, one of its weakest points was the Starship Combat. And for some oddball reason, that tends to be the case with a lot of science fiction role playing games where they pull off everything else really nicely. And then Starship Combat turns out to be meh. I can't say that's going to be the case here with Starfinder Second Edition. But like I said, it was a very weak point for First Edition. I'm hoping we're going to get a lot more information, a lot more uniqueness, maybe in that GM core that's arriving in August. Fingers crossed on that. But that is something else that I do want to mention, that the Starship Combat section in this player core isn't very in depth. Combat is, and of course, because Starfinder Second Edition does utilize the same 3-action economy as Pathfinder Second Edition, you have tons and tons of tactical options in combat and other modes of play in Starfinder Second Edition, which I really, really dig. So it's not just sitting there, swing my power axe, fire my laser rifle. No, there's a lot of stuff going on. Now, of course, that does add to the complexity of Starfinder Second Edition. So keep that in mind. But in my opinion, I think the additional math, the additional complexity really is outweighed by all the other cool stuff that actually leads to some of that math and the complexity. All in all, I think the player core for second edition Starfinder is excellent, even with the quibbles I've got. So, on a scale of 0 to 10, I gave the Starfinder second edition player core a 9 out of 10. It is that good. I'm excited. I would love to play this. Maybe not game master it, but I would love to play Starfinder second edition. I would GM it with virtual tabletop because that offloads a lot of that heavy mental lifting. But gotta say, this is a very cool book. And I think fans of Starfinder, fans of Pathfinder, and those who are curious about this second edition of Starfinder are going to be very, very pleased. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. It'll not only let you know about videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.